Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the 2026 Horror Games, where we'll be breaking down some of the best face-offs, the biggest upsets, and even some lukewarm takes on what's next for our surviving tributes. My name is Chris, I'm your host and representative for the Slasher District in this year's games, and with us we have the Monster Madness game maker herself, Chell. This round asked a very different question from our previous rounds, and in round 5, our tributes were forced to spread their wings, leave their comfort zones, and depart from their districts into unfamiliar territories. Chell, what can you tell us about this 5th round of play?
For this round, we challenged our tributes to step outside of their comfort zones, asking the question, how terrifying can they be when they have been plucked from their world and placed into the horrifying corners of other areas in the community?
Which means home field advantage has been turned on its head, quite frankly.
Absolutely. We challenged our tributes and those supporting them to really reflect on if the value of their tributes is rooted solely in where they grew up, or if it's able to be translated and cross district lines and boundaries all over the place.
Well, we had an interesting pair of matchups to really pose and play with the idea of that question, starting with Jennifer Check versus Frankenstein's monster.
This is such an old versus new classic battle. We have Frankenstein's monster, one of the originals, the OGs of horror, coming along with a very modern day menace in Jennifer Check. It was new versus old, and it really threw a lot of people one for a loop, thinking if legacy or newfound talents could outlast the other.
It is a question that really begs to be asked, and when you consider the dynamics of this matchup, it's honestly quite a tale in itself, because we had Frankenstein really coming from behind in a few of these matchups, only to now be confronted by Jennifer, who wasn't even in the game to begin with at the start of this season.
Absolutely. As we all know, with Jennifer Check, Hell is a teenage girl, and she certainly brought Hell down upon Frankenstein's monster and made it very clear that if she were sent back to the classic era, she would do just fine.
She would. I believe it. I don't think there's much of a challenge that's posed there. And she's honestly conjured up such a following in our fan base and in our districts.
Yes, we have whipped up quite a bit of fervor, especially behind Jennifer Check. So much so that there was even some threats and suggestions that if Jennifer Check did not move on, that potentially there'd be something funky going on from the Capitol, which, as we all know, we simply let the games play as they wish. We certainly do not have a hand in how the games are played.
I can assure you, if the games were rigged, you'd see a very different matchup happening here. But what I think is really interesting, especially when you consider the time and place of it all, obviously we have Frankenstein, who has endured as a property through generations. But I want to shout out Spooky Bitch in our district, who really took a moment to consider the framework of Jennifer Check and her story and the narrative and the film that surrounds it. She said, honestly, since it's back in the conversation, if you want a genuine snapshot of how the early 2000s treated young girls and women, watch America's Next Top Model or the documentaries. You had rail-thin girls being called fat, being shamed for every aspect of their body, grown men talking about how teenage girls that were 18 2 months ago, some even still in high school, weren't quote-unquote sexy enough for them. That's pretty much how we were treated every day, even on a day-to-day level. I think the biggest difference now is this shit is still happening, but there are people calling it out and saying it in a public space. Is there a lot of accountability or consequences still? No, but at least it's being called out for what it is. You had none of that back then, which Chell then raises the question, it really shines a lot here. Could Frankenstein endure the beauty standards of the mid-2000s?
Quote Taylor Swift, I don't think Frankenstein would last an hour in the asylum that raised Jennifer.
Damn, Taylor Swift, that's deep.
Now, on the other side of the bracket, we had District 3 of Sci-Fi and District 4, the slashers, facing off together in what I found to be probably one of the more controversial matchups in this entire games, Chris.
I will like to say, as the District 4 mentor, this matchup was bullshit. That's just my opinion. I stated in our last round recap that Art the Clown may not appear to have the advantage here, but certainly has the advantage as the Thing tends to not do well with fire. The Thing does have a weakness. The Thing can be stopped. Art the Clown can throw on a coat. He donned Santa's outfit. But could the Thing really thrive in a slasher's world? I say no.
Well, this definitely was a cause for quite a bit of conversation in the Discord, with famed Capitol member Meat weighing in that the Thing is 100% consuming that whole family in one night magical sword, be damned, of course referencing prior movies. And I think Art is getting roasted by McCready and his crew, because they would be at full strength, not getting infiltrated one by one like the Thing did. And I think that is where we see a difference in strategy. While Art would just be swinging wholesale, trying to mow down as many people at once, the Thing is methodical. The Thing takes out its prey one by one.
And yet can still be harmed. I'm still not buying it. And I'll tell you why I'm not buying it. Art the Clown bombed a mall full of children. I'm pretty sure he can take out the numbers in Antarctica. I cannot believe my boy didn't come through here.
And yet here we stand, especially with the sci-fi versus slashers, you think really grounded on Earth and up in the space. So it is fascinating to see how well the Thing has done thus far in this tournament. Certainly, I would say quite a few of the categories have worked in their favors based on who they've been matched up with. And I do think that as we get into the next round, it's really going to be, as you say, putting its feet to the fire.
Oh, there's going to be so much fire. But, of course, as we enter the championship round, and as the list of those eliminated grows, so too do the stakes. Before we discuss the final round of play, let us pay tribute to, well, our final fallen tributes.
For District 1, Frankenstein's monster.
And from District 4, may he rest in peace, Art the Clown. Remember, evil never dies. It just changes shape. And alas, here we are, folks, on the precipice of the final round of play in the 2026 Horror Games for our two remaining tributes, Jennifer Check and The Thing. We will find our 2026 Horror Games champion. But in order for either of them to claim the crown, they must face one final foe. Isn't that right, Chell?
Yes. For this final round of play, we have decided that these two tributes facing off against each other simply would not do. Where is the drama in that? So we sent word to the victor's villa and called upon a true titan of terror to help determine which tribute deserves the title.
You mean District 4 is still in the game?
Yes, Chris, I do mean District 4 is still in the game. We are bringing Michael Myers back to the arena. And instead of fighting each other, voters will decide which of these tributes is most likely to defeat the 2025 Monster Madness winner, Michael Myers.
Wow. On the one hand, it's difficult. You have John Carpenter on John Carpenter crime here. Feels a little disrespectful. On the other hand, Jennifer Check is really good at eating boys.
And if you think about, of course, Michael Myers, he was our 2025 victor, but he is not without weaknesses. He has been bested many, many times by a teenage girl and teenagers of all sorts. So perhaps Jennifer Check has his number, so to speak, and we'll be able to use that to our advantage.
I really have not considered for a moment whether a teenage girl could truly defeat Michael Myers. Now, how would Laurie Strode feel about this? Because obviously we had, in 1978, she faced Michael, but she didn't destroy him. She didn't beat him. She merely outlasted him until there was intervention. But The Thing, once again, Halloween Kills, Michael Myers was in a whole lot of fire.
This is also true. The Thing will really have to find how best it can adapt and evolve, how they can embody something that perhaps would be able to overpower Michael Myers.
Let's take a moment to think about just a few of the matchup details here. You have Michael Myers, who has near supernatural durability, derives insane damage on a regular basis. He is relentless. He's a patient hunter, not unlike The Thing. He's strong, but he does still operate in a physical and human-adjacent way. and he's not particularly adaptive or strategic beyond stalking and killing. Now, the thing about Michael is that he actually outlasts and outstalks, and I love that there's even connection to Michael and The Thing, because The Thing is a film that plays in several Halloween films. Now, not always the same variation of The Thing. It is, in fact, the classic The Thing from Another World in the original film. But for The Thing, it does have perfect imitation and assimilation. It absorbs and can become anything it touches, almost anything at least. It can split into multiple independent forms, and it's only reliably killed by total destruction. Again, I've seen Michael Myers walk out of the very circumstance that would take the thing down. And for Jennifer, superhuman strength and regeneration. She can levitate, manipulate, and she can even seduce victims. She has durability, but it does vary based on how recently she's eaten, and she's still killable with the right method, like a stab to the tit. So, Jill, I mean, there's a lot of factors at play here.
Absolutely, and I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy fight for any of the three of them. Again, Michael Myers, he has rested on his laurels this year. He has enjoyed his time in the Victor's Villa, so perhaps he will be surprised at who he finds awaiting him in the arena. As we talked about with Jennifer Check, she has just absolutely been obliterating every opponent that she comes across. Perhaps her thirst for blood is sated, and she will be at full power when she tries to unrelenting, as you said with Michael Myers. He is unrelenting, but so is a teenage girl, goddamn. A teenage girl can absolutely tear you to shreds, and perhaps Mike Myers just hasn't met the right girl yet.
You know, a vote for Jennifer is a vote for women everywhere in this Women's History Month. So, there you have it, folks. We are in the final days of the 2026 horror games, but now is not the time to give in to fatigue or despair. Our tributes need you all to show your support into the bitter and bloody end. Submit your votes, invite your friends, and then visit the link in our show notes to leave a voicemail to share your support for your chosen tribute.
Voting will begin March 27th, that is Friday, and it will end on Tuesday, March 31st. The winner will be announced during the recap on April 1st.
Good luck, and may the scares be ever in your favor.